Hello, everyone, and welcome to No Buts About It. It is Wednesday, March 18th, and free agency, it's winding down. Ain't gonna lie to you, but we've still got some news to talk about. We've still got plenty to talk about. We still have plenty of unknowns when it comes to the NFL. What is going to happen in the 2026 season? One of those things is, what are the Cincinnati Bengals going to do at linebacker? A lot of those targets that we talked about all of last week are gone. They didn't get signed to the Bengals. They signed elsewhere. Leo Chanel, a guy that I really wanted the Bengals to go after. He signed with the Commanders. Devin Lloyd, he signed with the Panthers. Panthers have been having a fantastic free agency. So what are the Bengals going to do at free agency? And now it currently looks like they are planning on filling some of those holes in the draft, or they look at Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight Jr. both as starters. And granted, they were rookies last year. They just both kind of didn't hit the mark. They didn't hit their expectations. And so I don't think that a first round investment in a rookie linebacker like Sonny Styles is out of the question. The thing is there's a solid chance Sonny Styles is not there in at pick 10, This is we've said it time and time again. I'm sure I'll say it 100 times before April. This is a really weird draft. We've got a lot of defensive players going early on. We've got a lot of non-premium positions going early on. It's guys the Bengals may target, such as safety with Caleb Downs, linebacker with Sonny Styles. We've got some other, lower positions that, people don't usually spend huge investment picks. Those are the best players in this draft. The Vikings got a Hall of Fame punter now, according to Chris Vikings. Chris, are you talking about Mr. Johnny Hecker? You believe he's going to the Hall of Fame? Okay. Yeah, he signed a 1-year contract with Minnesota earlier today. So shout out to Johnny Hecker. He's got a heck of a last name, I'll tell you that. I don't know about the Hall of Fame, but maybe the Hall of Fame for last names. We also had another big transaction that went through earlier today. It got announced yesterday, went through today. So let's look at that. So actually, real quick, before we look at that, let's look at all the stuff that's kind of happened since we last spoke. And this is not an exhaustive list. This is just a good amount of this stuff. Some of the bigger names. I'll tell you, it's not an exhaustive list because Kyler Murray to the Vikings is not even on this list. But I tried to include some variety. So Jerome Ford went to the Commanders, kind of a down year last year after getting stuck behind Quinshon Judkins in his rookie year. We'll see how he does in Washington. I don't dislike Ford. I thought that he was decent in Cleveland. I would like to see him kind of do well in Washington, but only time will tell there. Judkins was definitely the better back. And I really like what they have in Sampson there in Cleveland as well. So, Ford moving on maybe opens that up for Sampson. Darnell Mooney to the Giants. Trey Lance is returning to the Chargers. Jaquan Brisker, who is a big name we've been talking about this entire process, is headed to the Steelers. Arnold Ebiketie is heading to the Eagles. Geno Stone says he wanted to return to a winning culture in the NFL, and that's why he chose the Buffalo Bills. Except Geno Stone was one of the biggest problems on the Cincinnati Bengals, so we'll see how that works out. I'm just saying, don't throw rocks from glass houses, Geno. Anyway, Justin Fields was traded to the Chiefs for a 2027 sixth round pick. He'll be backing up Patrick Mahomes. And depending on how Patrick's rehab goes, remember he was injured in, I believe, week 17 of the regular season. So depending on how his rehab goes, Justin Fields may have to start a game or two. Christian Kirk is heading to the 49ers on a crazy low deal, in my opinion. And having him, Mike Evans, Pearsall, they could have some weapons there for Brock Purdy. Could be a really good signing, really good undervalued wide receiver. Jaylen Waddle was traded to the Broncos in a blockbuster trade that we'll go into a little bit more detail here. The Broncos ended up doing a 4th round pick swap, the 3rd round pick, and then of course a 1st round pick as part of that Jaylen Waddle trade. So they really wanted Jaylen Waddle, effectively just giving up a 1st and a 3rd for him, and then a little bit less investment in that 4th round pick. So that was interesting. What do we think about that? Do we think that investment was worth it? We got Marquise Brown to the Eagles, Wyatt Teller to the Texans, another big name guard off of the chart. So let's see. Chris says Bills is good for regular season wins, but chokes in the playoffs. Yeah, I don't dislike the Bills. I tend to root for the Bills. I just thought it was kind of funny seeing Geno Stone make that comment about how, the reason the Bengals were losing was because of the culture. Because, say what you want about Zach Taylor, say what you want about the Bengals as a whole. I think we could generally say the culture in Cincinnati is very good. They have a very good locker room. Think about it. There was never a point where you heard really officially, the frustrations came out, but no one came out and said yeah, the reason we're losing football games is because of the defense or something like that, even though it was painfully obvious. Most of the guys would say stuff along the lines of, we just have to score more points. But I think that, Geno Stone's not being completely honest with himself here. And I know he has to say, he's going to hype up his new team, and that's fine. But I don't know. I don't know about that, Geno. I don't know that you're going to get the winning culture that you were hoping for in Buffalo. Just got to be honest with yourself. But let's look at Jaylen Waddle. So Jaylen Waddle, over the course of his career, this shocked me a little bit. This is the old. I updated this because I messed up the numbers. I got to see if I can find this one. Is it any different? Did it not save? We'll see if you can figure out nope, it didn't save. Okay. The regular season games is wrong here. First of all, he has played only 85 regular season games. And he's only missed 7 games, not 9. So that was where my stat was wrong on my short yesterday. So where it says 87 on this graphic, just ignore that. It is incorrect. He's played 78 out of 85 regular season games. I know. So Chris Viking says your Bengals problem isn't scoring points, it's preventing opponents from scoring. I know. And it's tackling, which Geno Stone was the worst about. He took the worst angles. I think he had the most missed tackles of anyone on the league. So, yeah. Why Wyatt Teller on the thumbnail? He got signed by Houston. Shady G and AD, first of all, thank you for joining in on us here. I'll tell you why Wyatt Teller is on the thumbnail. And that's because we've been talking about guards a lot in these live streams because we've had some Chargers fans joining with us, and they've been waiting for a guard. And Wyatt Teller was one of those guys that we were looking at. And yes, he got signed by Houston to a 2-year deal. And I don't know if we have a number with that yet. Let me scroll through here real quick, see if Spot Track is updated to that. 2-year, $16 million contract with Houston. So we're going to talk about him a little bit. He's not a free agent anymore. I'm sorry if I kind of gave that idea, but yeah, he's not a free agent. But we will continue to talk about guards, and Wyatt Teller is just one of those guys that we've been talking about a lot. So I put him on the thumbnail because he was one of the bigger names that got signed throughout the week that we've been talking about. Hope that answers that. But back to Jaylen Waddle. 78 out of 85 regular season games. Again, that 87 is incorrect. I misdid some math. I'm not good at math. I apologize. Yeah, and I was a little shocked. I felt like Jaylen Waddle, he's injured a lot, I thought, but he's only missed 7 games in his career. He's just kind of had those, lingering injuries where he was still able to make it on the field. So I think that shows toughness from him, and hopefully he doesn't have to deal with that as much in Denver. He had 26 touchdowns, 6 of which came in 2025, 544 targets, 100 of which came in 2025 and he had a up year there. Primarily because Tyreek Hill went down. So that helped him a little bit, obviously. He had 373 receptions. 64 of those were in 2025. So he hauled in exactly 64% of his catches that he was targeted with in 2025. So solid numbers there. And then he's got 5,039 total yards. 910 came in 2025. He was just short of 1K. However, he did have 3 1,000 yard seasons in his career. And I think that this could end up, I don't like the investment aspect so far of it, because I feel like giving up a first and a third is a lot for Jaylen Waddle. It's a lot for any wide receiver, especially just because of how many great wide receivers there are in the NFL. There's a ton of great wide receivers in this draft class specifically. And giving up a first and a third just seems like overkill. It just, I think you would have to have, you almost have to make the Super Bowl now at this point with the investment that the Broncos have put into Jaylen Waddle. And I think that Jaylen Waddle could very easily become their wide receiver 1 very quickly. And I like Courtland Sutton. I think he's an underrated receiver. Someone commented they thought he was the most underrated receiver in the whole league. I don't know that I agree with that, but I do think Courtland Sutton is a very underrated receiver. And, Jaylen Waddle, he's fast. He's been that deep threat before, and he's kind of similar in some ways to Tyreek Hill, not all the way similar in terms of speed, but he's got a lot of similarities in his game, and he's just been kind of stuck behind him this entire time. And then you've got the fact that, Bo Nix came into the league, and a lot of people said he was just this check down guy. He could use his legs a little bit, but he didn't have much of an arm. I think that Bo Nix has shown that he can get the ball down there, a few times a game. Now, is he going to be like Drake May or like an Anthony Richardson, where that's his game, where he excels at the deep ball? He's better at the deep ball. No, but I do think we could see some, just maybe like three times a game, we see him lofted up to Jaylen Waddle, and Jaylen Waddle could become that deep threat, that big yards after catch guy, almost that Alec Pierce type receiver who just, runs away from safeties. And I think that's what the Broncos need on their offense. They don't really have that right now. They've tried to have that with some guys, but really it's been Sutton. They use Ingram for the checkdowns, and then their wide receiver 2 and 3 has been kind of by committee. So now if Sutton can take on that wide receiver 2 position, still with those intermediate throws, still with those, contested throws, and then you've got Ingram going against linebackers, again, yards after catch, great tight end, great receiving tight end. You could open up this offense a ton, and it's going to cause the safeties to have to play deeper because they're going to have to respect Jaylen Waddle and what Jaylen Waddle can do, which in turn will allow the run game to open. It's going to allow guys like Ingram and Sutton to, get more yards after catch, because it's going to take longer for those safeties to come down and try to tackle them as well. So there's going to be less people playing on the ball. And I just think ultimately this is going to, help open up Davis Webb's offense, who Sean Payton has brought in for a reason. He brought in a guy and he trusts him a lot because he's given up play calling to this guy. Sean Payton's trying new things with the Denver Broncos, and I could see this Jaylen Waddle trade being a big part of that. Let's see here. I want to get back to the comments here. Shady G and AD says probably use one of our higher picks on a guard if I had to guess. Ben Powers on the last year of his contract, and I imagine they're going to plan for that in advance. Think we wait to draft OT next year. Yeah, so we've had B Wilkes in here. Shady, are you a Chargers fan as well? Then B Wilkes has been a Chargers fan, and he's just been in here talking about just how upset he is with the lack of investment in the O-line the Chargers have had. So Ben Powers is a Broncos, so I assume you're a Broncos fan, actually. But I don't get what the Chargers are doing, because they're kind of in the same situation that the Bengals were in when Joe Burrow came into the league. And this is the first year that Joe Burrow has a O-line that isn't, that everyone is returning. There's no new starters on the O-line this year for the first time in Joe Burrow's career. Guard is becoming more of a premium position, I think. It's very important to have that interior, rush, as you've had more pass rushing defensive tackles, or at least defensive tackles that get better at pass rushing. Guys like Jalen Carter have come into the league and completely disrupted that game. You can't necessarily, just throw in a guy who's your depth offensive tackle. I feel like the guards are going to be seeing an increase in their contracts here soon. They've always been kind of just seen as smaller tackles and thus lesser paid. But at this point, they're having to do just as much, if not more, than tackles because of the way defenses have shifted and the way they've applied pressure. And you can see how much a guard impacts the playing style of your tackles. And so you almost have to invest in a good guard, just to make your investment in a good tackle worth it. For example, we saw when the Bengals had Amarius Mims on the right tackle and Jalen Rivers was starting next to him. Jalen Rivers didn't do great. Now, I still have a lot of hope for Jalen Rivers. He was in his rookie year, fifth round pick. But Amarius Mims looked significantly worse with Jalen Rivers starting next to him than he did with Dalton Risner starting next to him. And once Dalton Risner got in there, once they took Lucas Patrick out, Jalen Rivers out, and got someone who was competent next to him, Amarius Mims looked better. Now, do we think that Amarius Mims just all of a sudden overnight decided to be good at football? No, he wasn't having to, overcompensate. He could worry about his outside instead of having to worry about both the inside and the outside, because he couldn't trust the guy to his left to, take over for him. And I think that's what we're going to end up seeing with the Chargers on. The Chargers have two really good tackles. They both got hurt last year, but they're still really good. They're still fantastic, still top of their game. And if you don't have those really good guards, you're going to, be in trouble. And the Broncos, I think the Broncos I truthfully don't know where their O-line ranks. I think they have a pretty good O-line from what I've seen, what I'm remembering that I've seen. But O-line is just something that you constantly have to be retooling. And that's why, even though the Bengals extended Orlando Brown Jr., I would still not be against maybe a day 3 offensive tackle pick and kind of still working towards eventually replacing him, planning for that ahead. Because say Orlando gets hurt for a game or two, then you've got a guy who can step in for a game or two, protect your quarterback, because they are your last line of defense against your biggest investment, and that is the quarterback. And the Broncos are going to have to worry about that with Bo Nix soon. The Chargers should be worrying about that with Justin Herbert. The Bengals finally figured it out, I think, with Joe Burrow. But I guess, Shady, if you are a Broncos fan, as it appears you are, what are your thoughts on the Jaylen Waddle trade? Um, do you think, are you cool with this investment? Are you happy with this investment? Because I guess for me, yes, I just said all those great things about opening up the offense, about it being more exciting, about this development. Um, but also feel like you could get that with a day two pick in this draft. I feel like there are guys who could accomplish that similar task as well. And that, Jaylen Waddle isn't necessarily a premium wide receiver at this point in um where things are setting up. And that's not a knock on him at all. It's just there's so much depth at wide receiver in this league. Let's see here. Shady did respond. He said, Broncos fan, but I think overall we'll probably draft 2, maybe 3 offensive players and draft like 4 or 5 defensive players. Heavy defensive draft. And as of now, more questions than. See, that's interesting to me that you say that, if I'm understanding you correctly, that your defense has more questions than offense, because as an outsider, like who's not, I'm not ingrained in the Denver Broncos media landscape. I'm not, looking at the Denver Broncos stuff every day. I would have thought you guys were going to go more offensive because your guys' defense was fantastic last year. I know you lost some key players, John Franklin Myers being among them, but you still have Patrick Surtain. You still have Nick Benito. You still have some really good players on that defense. So I guess I would have thought, it makes sense to go after a few offensive players, either or defensive players either way. But I would have thought you would have had a more heavy offensive draft. Because that's where it really seemed like you struggled. And full disclosure, I ripped the Broncos apart last year. I was so irritated with the Broncos fans I knew, because they were talking like they were the best team to ever exist when, you guys kept winning at the last minute, it felt like, or a lot of your games came down to one play, or there was the Giants game that just, you guys won, but it was more of the Giants collapsing than it was the Broncos winning, it felt like. And so I guess my question is, do you feel like the defense was more of a fluke, or do you think that you just have lost, like losing John Franklin Myers is a bigger loss than what we like perceived? Why do you feel like you have to go more defensive than offensive this year? And clearly you are investing in the offense because of the Jaylen Waddle trade. That's a huge investment, absolutely massive, to go without a first round pick. What picks do you guys have left? Well, this isn't accurate. You guys have a second, a fourth, one of your fourths, a fifth, and 3 sevenths. That you got 2 compensatory picks for Javonte Williams and Riley Dixon, assuming this is accurate. The only original picks you have are your round 2 pick, your round 5 pick, and one of your round 7 picks. You originally traded your round 6 pick for John Franklin Myers, who is not with the team anymore. Yeah, So Chris Viking said, "I would say because this draft is better for defense than offense." Yeah, I think that's true. But what would you say the identity of the Broncos was last year? I don't think I'm out of my head to say I think it's fair and rightful to say that the Broncos' identity last year was their defense. Um, and I completely understand, maybe your day one pick is defense, which they don't have a day one pick anymore. They used it on offense. But I'm a little shocked that he expects them to go heavier on the offense, just total in the draft, or heavier on defense, just total in the draft. And that's why I'm curious. That's why I like doing these live streams, because I like learning from you guys, because I do a ton of research, I do a ton of reading, but I also recognize that I'm only one guy. And you guys are more ingrained to your teams than what I am. And so like I see it with the Bengals and the Colts all the time, where, the national media is talking about these teams, and it's like they've never watched or like for me it's like they've never watched the game. I'm like, what are you talking about? We have this great up and coming player that we've had for years, and you just forgot that he existed. And I do my best to try and not be like that, but it's going to happen. It's just, I'm human. I'm going to forget people. I don't have the entire NFL roster memorized. I'm working on it, but it's hard. So just kind of getting insight from you guys helps a ton as well, because you guys know way more about like who your depth chart is and stuff like that. So yeah, defense was the Broncos, but I would say retool defensive. And I think that's true. I think that's 100% fair, because especially in my, let me see if I can find, but in my mind, the biggest player the Broncos lost in free agency was John Franklin Myers, who was on that defensive line. And that's a big loss. So John Franklin Myers, they're listing Dre Greenlaw. He was hurt, but he's still a really good player. Really good leader in that locker room. Went back to the 49ers in free agency. Let's see. They've got defensive back PJ Locke, defensive back Tanner McAllister. Are those big losses? Like, Tanner McAllister's probably that's a depth guy, isn't it? And then PJ Locke, I don't think he's that big of a maybe. And again, this is where I'm maybe just speaking ignorantly. I don't know that that's that massive of a loss where I think I have to go heavy investment, where like I feel like you could replace him in free agency pretty easily. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Shady said, our offense may have struggled at times, but we just need one piece to put it over. We also had a top rush offense before Dobbins got hurt. That's true. And I really do. Like, I'm not just placating there. I really do think that Jaylen Waddle could be that guy. I do think that Jaylen Waddle can open up that offense. I don't know that it's worth the investment, though. I think if you were coming into this and saying, we drafted this guy, I don't know, like, for example, Amar Cooper Jr., just someone who's probably going to go day 2. We drafted him, and I think he's going to open up the offense. That'd be one thing. But to give up a first and a third is crazy to me. That's like a Hall of Fame wide receiver in my mind. You would give that up for. That's like a trade that you do for like Jamar Chase in my mind. And I don't think Jaylen Waddle is Jamar Chase level. Maybe not Jamar, but like T. Higgins. First and a third is for like T. Higgins. And maybe I'm just biased. Maybe Jaylen Waddle is up there. I don't think Jaylen Waddle's as good as T. Higgins. I could be biased, though. I could be biased. I'm completely open to that. But I don't know. I think that the Broncos probably could have gotten what they're going for here with a lesser investment. Um, but we'll see. Well, ultimately, none of this matters until the season begins and we see what the Broncos actually bring to the table when it comes to the offense. They could completely misuse Jaylen Waddle, but as much as Sean Payton annoys the crap out of me, he is a pretty good head coach, and he tends to use his players correctly. It seems, and I think Davis Webb is probably also going to be a decent at worst offensive coordinator. And if Davis Webb doesn't do well with play calling, Sean Payton will not be shy about taking back over. So we got that. Some remaining free agents that we have left. Quarterback Kirk Cousins, wide receiver Tyreek Hill, wide receiver Stephon Diggs, left tackle Taylor Deckard, guard Joel Bitonio, who we've talked about. He's another guy we've talked about. He's another one of those Browns guards. Joel is older, may just retire. Tight end David Njoku, who visited with the Ravens, so he may be another one who switches AFC North teams. Remember, they lost Isaiah Likely to the Giants, so they are in the Ravens are in the market for a tight end. Edge Joey Bosa, and I saw Nick Bosa cleared up some cap space in his contract. So could we be seeing the Bosa brothers both in San Francisco? Guard James Daniels, who I believe was part of that Miami, fire sale to get under the cap, get some cap space open. It'd be interesting to see where he goes. Linebacker Bobby Wagner, I'd like to see the Bengals get him, but we'll see. Edge AJ Epinesa, edge Cameron Jordan, guard Kevin Zeitler, linebacker Bobby Okereke, defensive tackle DJ Reader, cornerback L'Jarius Sneed, and of course, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just some bigger names that are out there. I tried to put up some positions that we'd been talking about here on the streams just in general last week during the free agency frenzy type stuff. Obviously need our tight end and running back of the future and potential be Powers replacement. Other than that, we're pretty much are set on off. I'm tight end. I agree with you 100%. Running back, I'm very interested to see what happens this year because think about all of the Kyle Manengai, Bill Krosky Merritt. I feel like there was more. I just feel like last year there were a bunch of running backs that were taken in the 7th round that just did really well. And I'm interested to see, we've been seeing that, value on running backs continue to decrease. So I'm intrigued to see if more teams are willing to take that risk of not taking a running back till the 2nd round. If we see guys like, I'm pretty sure Kalen Black out of IU is going to be in the draft. So if we see some of these running backs, that aren't, clear cut, big names kind of fall to the 7th round and teams aren't willing to invest until then because they saw what they could possibly get by waiting. I mean, they still got great running backs by waiting. You could see some come out as undrafted free agents. It's just kind of like if you're interested in watching trends, that's a trend that maybe I would pay attention to if I were you. Just see what happens with the running backs. I'm sure you'll have a few that'll be taken day 1, maybe day 2, but I think day 3 there could be this run on running backs that could be kind of funny. Bengals could use Njoku. I wouldn't be against it. I would not be against Njoku at all. Eric All has announced that he's coming back, and I think he could be fantastic, but the Bengals do need more than one tight end that can do both. They have Mike Gesicki who can catch. They have Drew Sample who can block. Tanner Hudson kind of depends on the day if he can catch. Eric All does both, and they need more variety. They have some good tight ends. They just don't have the variety in their tight end room. So bringing in David Njoku, I think, could open that up a little bit. Add some variety, add that ability to both catch where he is a receiving threat, but I think he can also block at least decently enough that, it doesn't tell the people to play. Because at this point, the Bengals offense, if Drew Sample's out there, it's going to be a run play. It's 90% certain it's going to be a run play. And right now we've got Mike Gesicki playing out of the slot as our wide receiver 3. Would love Denver to draft Jonah Coleman. I saw him play in person twice, saw him against Ohio State, and he gave that defense hell. Doesn't reflect it on the final score, but he did give them problems. And, that's the other thing about running backs, I think, is they're a position where you really have to watch film on, which all positions are that way. But they don't show, there's not a stat that shows the elusiveness of a running back. There are some more subjective stats like PFF does where it's like broke tackle rate or something like that. But I think running backs a lot of the time also kind of get that end of the stick if they're playing with a bad offensive line. And it's like, this guy averaged 2 yards per carry. But then you look at the offensive line and the gap he was supposed to run through, and it wasn't there. And that's not his fault, right? Now, if he picks the wrong gap, if you're watching and you're like, okay, if he ran between the tackle and the guard, he would be fine. But he decided to run between the guard and the center. That's different. But if you're just watching the line, it's like, okay, he's clearly supposed to run through a gap here. There is no gap. What's he supposed to do? That's something you can really only tell from film. And so looking at just stat sheets or looking at just hard numbers, you don't always get the full story with running backs. And I think they are one of the, like, with wide receivers, you at least can kind of, figure out what they're doing. Like Alec Pierce. I like Alec Pierce. I'm an Alec Pierce fan. I think he's developed well, but if you look at his yards, you're like, wow, he's a really good yards after catch guy. But then you watch him on film, and they're just throwing the ball over the top of everyone, and he's running with the ball. He's not breaking tackles. He's not, juking people or anything like that. So I just think that running backs get a short end of the stick when it comes to those stat lines, kind of. Jonah Coleman being out of Washington. Where does Lance Zierlein have Jonah Coleman ranked right now? Let's see here. Let's do a quick deep dive. He has him as a average backup or special teamer. So could fall. Probably a day 3 guy. Yep, he projects as a day 3 option who can compete for a job as a 3-down backup. So definitely a player that could develop into a starter or maybe just an RB2. I don't know that the Broncos need a starter. They just need someone to kind of give Harvey. Is Harvey your RB1 now? Is Dobbins still there? He re-signed, right? Dobbins re-signed. Yeah, so you don't need a big name. You just need someone who can maybe give those guys a break. You need a massage, cool. 13 seconds says he needs a massage. I don't know if that might be okay, whatever. But yeah, I think Jonah Coleman on day 7, if he's there, go for it. Again, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt wasn't seen as a great pick. Kyle Manengai wasn't seen as some big pick. And look at Kyle Manengai ran all over the Bengals defense when the Bears played the Bengals. So, you can have these guys kind of have breakout games just randomly. I thought so. Yeah. Dobbins re-signed with the Broncos. That's what I thought. I was pretty confident in that. but wanted to make sure. Chris, while you're hanging out here, we haven't really talked about it too much on the channel. I made a short about it, but your presumed new QB1 in Minnesota. What you got for me? Kyler Murray, future starter, future long-term starter. Is this a one-year rental? Education, time for JJ McCarthy. I know you're a JJ McCarthy fan. You pointed out he's only played 10 games and people are already out on him. But what are your thoughts? Do you think the Kyler Murray it's a competition? He says it's a competition. Okay. It's officially just a competition here in Minnesota for Chris Vikings. I'm fine with that. I love that. I think that's great. Everything I'd seen and watched and read said Kyler Murray was the guy. But if it's going to be I think that's the way to do this. Make JJ McCarthy beat out Kyler Murray. I mean, you don't lose anything. You don't have anything invested in Kyler Murray. The Arizona Cardinals are paying for him, so. And I think that the Kyler Murray Justin Jefferson connection has the potential to either be one of the best connections in the league, or it's going to be really, really bad, if that makes sense. And the reason I say that is because it seemed like him and Marvin Harrison Jr. never really got it going. And it just seems like, I don't know. I feel like him and Kyler Murray and Justin Jefferson there's just, I don't have anything analytical about this. It's just a vibe I'm getting. I'm going completely off vibes here, where I could see, just Kyler Murray completely ignoring Justin Jefferson and someone completely random being the new wide receiver 1 in Minnesota. Maybe TJ Hawkinson has a great year. Thanks for giving us Kenneth Walker. I don't know who you're talking to. Are there any Seahawks fans in here right now? Who gave you Kenneth Walker? I mean, the Bengals weren't going to sign Kenneth Walker. The Vikings weren't going to sign Kenneth Walker. I don't know who you're referring to, but you're welcome, I guess. Congrats on Kenneth Walker. Chris said, at least I hope we need McCarthy to start at least a couple games this year. KFC did come out and say he would like to have Murray for a couple of years. So, okay, that's weird. So KOC came out and said he'd like to have Murray for a couple years. But you think it's a competition still? Because that means you're relegating one of them to a backup. Or they're planning on trading JJ McCarthy, I suppose. And I think McCarthy is far more likely to be relegated to backup than what Kyler Murray is. Right? Like, I don't think even maybe this year Kyler Murray can be a backup, but he's eventually going to get a contract. He's eventually going to get paid by somebody, whether it's the Jets because the Geno Smith experiment 2.0 doesn't work out, or if it's someone else. Someone's going to pay Kyler Murray. I mean, Malik Willis has a starting spot in the NFL right now in Miami, which, going back to the Jaylen Waddle trade, I wonder if they talked to Malik Willis about that before he signed with them. Because if I'm Malik Willis, I'm a little upset right now because I signed there thinking, okay, I don't have Tyreek Hill, but I'm sure I've got at least Jaylen Waddle, right? And I've got Devon Achane. And now I have Devon Achane. And Devon Achane possibly wants out, even though Adam Schefter said he's not up for trade. But, after that, is there wide receiver 1 Malik Washington now? Is that right? I mean, I guess we could get that Malik to Malik connection. But I don't know. I'd be irritated. Jonu Smith isn't there anymore. They just don't really have any weapons for Malik Willis. And Malik Willis is kind of in his prove it moment as a starter, right? He looked really good in Green Bay as a backup. He's getting a starting opportunity and he just has no weapons. We'll see what Miami does in the draft, but as of now, if I'm Malik Willis, I'd be a bit irritated unless I was told ahead of time, like, hey, we're going to try to trade Jaylen Waddle. Just a heads up. If they did that, that's different, but I don't know if they did or not. I'd be a little surprised if they did do that because if Malik Willis ended up not signing with them, then he could go to another team and be like, hey, by the way, the Dolphins are trying to trade Jaylen Waddle. But yeah, I don't know. I just think that's interesting. There's a lot of like interesting quarterback situations that could happen here. Another one that I think that could get interesting is the Raiders. And obviously they're planning on drafting Fernando Mendoza first overall. But if they, sign Kirk Cousins, give Fernando a few games to develop. Fernando is not a player who's going to walk in day one and just, start slinging it. I think even he would say that. But he's a guy who's going to, if he is given time to develop, I think Fernando Mendoza can play very well, play very good football, be a very exciting player for Las Vegas. And I think they've invested very well in their offensive line. But I think bringing in someone like Kirk Cousins day one on a cheap contract, let Kirk Cousins start for 2 or 3 weeks, and then give Fernando the reins. I think there's going to be this shift. There's going to have to be this shift. The pendulum is going to have to swing back to where we let quarterbacks develop again. We give quarterbacks time to develop. Because right now, where we're at, it's just not, I don't think it's sustainable. The fact that we are, like Chris Vikings has pointed out, the fact that we are writing off J.J. McCarthy 10 games into his career is insane. They used to give players 3 seasons minimum before you wrote them off back in the early 2000s, and even before that. But now it's like a rookie has a bad game and we're like, oh, this guy sucks. Okay. And he could be a first overall pick. He could be a first round pick. He could be a top 10 pick. But was JJ McCarthy 10th overall or was he 11th overall? He was high up there. And he's already being written off. Michael Penix is another one. And I'm not even like that high on Michael Penix. I wasn't that high on Michael Penix. But you put all this investment on him, and now you're like, man, we're moving on. What? That's crazy. That's crazy. And it's because the league has become impatient. The league has become impatient when it comes to head coaching contracts. The league has become impatient when it comes to player contracts. They don't give teams time to, develop and build players, build cultures, build rosters. It just becomes a win now. We've gotten so used to, guys like Patrick Mahomes, who their first year starting, they come in and they just light up the league, that we forget about guys like Peyton Manning, who sucked his rookie year. Troy Aikman was bad his rookie year. The list goes on. There's a ton of Hall of Fame quarterbacks who are awful in their first few seasons. But, NFL stands for not for long. Yeah, I know. But then we just saw it, right? We just saw it with Sam Darnold. And everyone's like, this came out of nowhere. No, he developed. J.J. McCarthy is 22 years old. He's still younger, 22, 23 years old. He's still younger than some of the rookies in this year's draft class. And he's already being written off. And, maybe in 4 seasons, he's going to be somewhere and he's just going to light it up. I had to yawn. But he's going to light it up and be like, where did this come from? He developed. He got older. He matured. You shouldn't be shocked. But we don't give guys that opportunity anymore. We don't give coaches that. That's where it starts. We don't give coaches that opportunity, so they feel like they have to rush the process because they don't want to get fired, right? So, Cam Ward throws some interceptions, and everyone's like, "This was a waste of a pick." It's just crazy. Every team wants a rookie quarterback for the contract, but they don't want it. Exactly. Yeah. Everyone wants this young, promising. I mean, there's hope. There's optimism that comes with these young guys. But then as soon as they throw an interception, everyone starts freaking out. And it might not even be their fault. There were interceptions Cam Ward threw that were not his fault. That either the wide receiver ran the wrong route or it bounced off the receiver's hands. There were a lot that were his fault, don't get me wrong, but they all get chalked up to being the quarterback's fault. And that's not right. That shouldn't be the way we look at things, but unfortunately it is. We don't look at the context. Just in everything in America. not to make this a commentary on life, but just I feel like as Americans we just in general struggle to understand context of situations, and we see it in media literacy as well. Vikings owners have never developed a quarterback for 21 years. They have owned them, always wanted to go into the playoffs, and I think they have a chance. Which now that you say that, yeah, that's true. But also, why didn't they just follow that trend with Sam Darnold then? Was it just the hope and optimism behind J.J. McCarthy? I don't know. And now you're kind of in that same situation with Kyler Murray where you're hoping for that again as well. But yeah, it irritates me how quarterbacks are expected to develop and they're written off as busts so quickly. And then everyone feigns shock when, a guy ends up being okay. But whatever. I didn't have X open this entire time. Did we have some breaking news that I missed? That's completely on me if we did. We'll check real quick here. Oh. Ooh. Open McCarthy. Okay, that makes sense. I'm going to play the thing. We've got some stuff. I'm just going to run through them all. This apparently happened at the top of the show, and I completely missed it, so I apologize for that. The Philadelphia Eagles are giving up on Jalen Hurts and trading for – that's not what's happening. Trading for quarterback Andy Dalton. The Red Rifle is headed up to Philadelphia for a 2027 7th-round pick. Good for him. Good for Andy Dalton. I got no beef with Andy Dalton. Most average player in the NFL. But, Colts have signed actually, hang on. Colts have actually made two signings. Colts signed former Dolphins wide receiver Nick Westbrook-Ikhine on a 1-year deal. And remember, the Colts did lose Michael Pittman through trade, so they need to add some wide receiver depth. The Colts also signed former Cardinals linebacker Akeem Davis-Gaither. And just remember, Akeem Davis-Gaither used to be on the Bengals, where Lou Anarumo, the former defensive coordinator for the Bengals, he's now the Colts defensive coordinator. So, that makes sense. There's, some speculation that Trey Hendrickson was going to go there before he went to the Ravens. Logan Wilson, linebacker for the Bengals, who was traded to the Cowboys last season, has announced his retirement. And then T.Y. Hilton, who I thought was already retired, has also announced his retirement. Okay. T.Y. Hilton is retiring from the NFL. I love T.Y. Hilton. He was a great wide receiver. That sounded a little bit sarcastic. That wasn't supposed to be sarcastic. I thought he was already retired. But congrats T.Y. Hilton on a great career. Congrats Logan Wilson on a great career. I mean, honestly, like I was mad you got traded. Thank you for all you did for the Bengals, and I hope you have a long, successful career doing whatever you do after football. So that's our news there at the end. What do we think about the Spider-Man trailer? Did anyone else watch? I told you on Twitter we were going to talk about it. I'm going to keep my promise. Did anyone else watch the new Spider-Man trailer? I'm really excited about it. I'm gonna make some of these posts here for the Instagram, but you let me know. I mean, Scorpion was in it. Punisher was in it. We heard Tombstone in it. It looked like Jean Grey was in it. Lots of great characters in that Spider-Man trailer. I was annoying people at work all night. I was like, it's coming. 7 a.m. It's coming. Chris Vikings didn't know about it. Oh my gosh. Chris. Tom Holland was live at the Empire State Building to announce the trailer. Shame. Well, I'm excited for it. July 31st. Spider-Man, brand new day. Looks fantastic. Looks absolutely awesome. Okay, guys, go do your homework. Watch the Spider-Man trailer, and we'll talk about it next time, okay? I'm sure I'll watch it like 30 more times between now and then. Okay? Chris, that's your homework. Everyone listening at home on Spotify, that's your homework. Also, if you haven't watched our interview with Nina and Julia from the Cincinnati Bengals, go check out that interview. That was really fun. Really enjoyed that interview. They offered a ton of insight into the world of cheerleading, stuff I didn't even think about as a fan. And I think it's really cool. So make sure you go check that out. Both of those girls were so sweet, so fun to talk to. They put up with my corny jokes as well. So I appreciate them so much. Make sure you check that out. But I think that's going to do it for us today. We talked about the Broncos a lot, way more than I thought we were going to. So shout out Broncos country. Let's ride, I guess. And thank you so much for sticking around with me today. We got I don't do homework. So final comment, Chris says, I don't do homework. That's why my grades weren't the best. Well, don't worry, Chris. This is really easy homework. Go watch that interview with Julia and Nina, and then go watch the Spider-Man trailer, or flip that and reverse it. Just watch them both. But thank you so much for sticking around with us. Please remember to leave a like, comment, let us know what you think. And until next time, go do something nice for someone.